So, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to this concluding session of Samagam 2022. We've had, of course, a very, very invigorating, intellectually stimulating, informative day. And we've been at it since 10 o'clock in the morning. It's 5 o'clock now, so 7 hours of almost non-stop discussions, dialogue, and deep dive into lots and lots of issues. So just a quick rundown on how the day has progressed, and I would also like to share with you a very, very brief history, particularly with our guests, our esteemed panel. More people are expected to join in. We have a full house of six very esteemed guests and panelists joining me today in this key takeaway session. But before I introduce them and before I go to them, Samagam, a little bit background about Samagam. And Samagam, as you know, denotes conversions of ideas, of conversations, and so on and so forth. And also a very interesting history of Samagam itself. So when Samagam started, which was 4 years ago in 2018, began as an initiative which was brought forth by Pradhan. So from 2018, then we had the Samagam in 2020, and now we have the Samagam of 2022. And in between, we had 4 regional Samagams, starting from the Northeast, then from Himalaya, then from Paschim and Dakshin Samagam. So that's how also this journey has been. But the most significant thing is that what started as a one organization initiative in 2018 by Pradhan has now transformed into a 10 organization. Yes, and I repeat this again because this gives a lot of hope, gives a lot of strength, that 10 organizations have come together to host Samagam 2022. So, of course, we have Pradhan, we have Priya, we have CYSD, which are ably supported by Niti Aayog, by FICCI, Aditya Birla CSR Center for Excellence, and Vani India. So these are the 6 prime players. And these are being supported with local organizations like Mission Samriddhi, Social Development for Communities Foundation, Sahyog Foundation, and SISTA. So 10 organizations, as I said, coming together. What is the theme of Samagam 2022, you might wonder? And the theme is simply partnerships and winning coalitions for achieving our SDGs. So this is what it is. When we began the day, the first thing that I said right in the beginning was, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So this African proverb, very simple, but really thought-provoking. And this is what, we've been deliberating. We had 3 exceptionally gifted keynote speakers who were there in the morning. And then we had 3 other sessions. The 3 sessions delved on the role of civil society organization, coalitions. The second one was on donors, another as I said, very stimulating dialogue. And we just a short while ago concluded on convergence, where we had 3 very senior officials from the government of India and from state governments. So we've had a battery of thought leaders, practitioners, retired bureaucrats, you name it, and we had it. And before I welcome and introduce our esteemed panelists, a note of appreciation and gratitude to all those people who have joined us today, who have been patient listeners. I know that it's far easier to speak rather than listen. So hats off to your listening abilities. Hats off to you for making this sort of program so enriching, for you, that you have been asking questions so patiently. I also apologize. Due to time constraints, we have not managed to answer each and every question. But on behalf of the organizing team, I just want to silently or whatever, clap and applaud for your presence and for your participation today. So this is a little bit the context and the background. As I said, we have 6 very, very special, distinguished panelists with us today. Some of them have joined. I think more will join as we go along. So I would like to actually start the evening with Dr. Mukund Rajan. So the format we are going to follow. And this is addressed to the panelists. We have 2 questions for you. So we will wrap it up by 6:30. So that's the timeline that we are setting for ourselves. And we have 6 panelists. We have structured it in a manner that we'll ask, broadly speaking, 2 questions from each of you. So 6 twos are 12. We have about 12 questions. And it'll be my humble request that if you can take 4 or 5 odd minutes to answer a question. So, and if we do that, we will close around 6:30 or so, or even a little bit earlier than that. So, my first question is going to be towards Dr. Mukund Rajan. But before I come to the question, a brief introduction about his illustrious background. I'm reading out from his resume, from his bio. Dr. Mukund Rajan is a chairman of eCube Investment Advisors, which is a first of its kind platform created in 3 years ago in 2019 to catalyze environment, social, and governance. So, what is called ESG changes in corporate India. He's had a sterling corporate career, and he's held a number of senior executive positions through his 23-year career with the Tata Group. I will not go into each and every role. He has served on the board of various Tata companies. Dr. Rajan currently serves as the chairperson of the Environment Committee of FICCI, and he's also a member of the Council of Management of the Forum of Free Enterprise. So, apart from that, in 2007, which is 15 years ago, the World Economic Forum has honored Dr. Rajan as a young global leader. He was also part of the inaugural class of the CII Aspen Institute India Leadership Initiative. Educationally, Dr. Rajan is a graduate from IIT. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's a writer. His third book on corporate responsibility and ESG, titled Outlast: How ESG Can Benefit Your Business, which has been co-authored with Dr. Colonel Rajiv Kumar, has just been published by HarperCollins. So, friends, thank you so much for your patience. And but it takes time when the bio is so what you call distinguished. So, Dr. Rajan, the first question for you, straight away coming to you, is a simple question and the question is that, going forward, how do you look at ESG issues as a part of the cost of doing business? Do you see that as a part of doing business, or rather do you see them as issues to be addressed from business surplus and profits? Over to you, Dr. Mukund Rajan.
Thank you, Anup. Thank you for the kind introduction. No, I really think that now ESG is helping to mainstream sustainability into the strategies of corporates. And I think the most forward-looking companies are really embracing the ESG agenda in toto. I think in the past, there was a sense that issues around sustainability were issues that could be, in a sense, deflected to the periphery, both within the organization and in terms of commitments made to stakeholders. But increasingly, I think that has changed. And there are several reasons for why I think this has been changing in recent years. I think the first and perhaps most important reason is the fact that now there is a clear understanding that unsustainable practices that impact the environment, that impact the cohesion of society, are potentially creating existential threats for humankind. And I think what we've been through, for instance, with COVID in the last 2 years, the pandemic has really been one illustration of nature, in a sense, revolting at humankind's impact and demonstrating that no matter how rich, wealthy, powerful you might be, you cannot escape the clutches of this kind of pandemic. Likewise, I think climate change and global warming is now really demonstrating that there are existential threats to communities across the world. In our country itself, for instance, the number of people who live close to the coastline could be a threat from sea level rise, the impact that you could see on agriculture, the impact you could see on labor productivity. So I think people are understanding now that lives and livelihoods are at risk. I think the science has dramatically improved in recent years that allows us to have a much better sense of the impact that can be created by these kinds of issues. I think technology allows people to be more informed and aware, and also to spread their concerns. So when communities are concerned about issues, they're able to transmit their concerns to the policymakers, to politicians, to people in power, and the expectations of response have also therefore increased. So I think in this kind of milieu, it is impossible for corporates to sort of ignore these concerns and to sort of deflect attention from these issues and their own responsibility for some of these issues. In terms of what companies are now beginning to do, I think you're seeing the best companies now responding with a clear governance focus of these issues. So on the ESG agenda, for instance, now increasingly in corporate India, you're seeing companies creating ESG committees of the board. Think about companies like Infosys, Airtel, Ashok Leyland. Other companies like Tata Steel and NTPC in the public sector have started combining the mandate of the CSR committee with sustainability, and they're calling it the CSR and Sustainability Committee of the Board. All of these companies are now creating a locus of attention within the management on sustainability and ESG issues. I think many of the best companies are now focusing much more on investing for the future in trying to both forecast the kinds of risks that will arise as a result of ESG issues, preparing themselves. And obviously, I think the most salient risk that people are looking at is global warming and climate change. So more investment in R&D to prepare for those issues, and the list goes on. So I think really there is a sense on the part of the best companies that these are no longer issues that are outside of the mainstream, both from the perspective of averting risk and also potentially addressing opportunities for the future. It is very important to be cognizant of what is now coming ahead of you and demonstrating to your stakeholders, many of whom care about these issues, whether it is customers, millennials, Gen Z, the regulators, government, and so on, that you are really committing yourself to be more responsive and you have a plan of action in place. And I think increasingly we will see expectations of disclosure, which a whole bunch of members of civil society, nonprofits, think tanks are going to be scrutinizing very closely. And in a sense, their output is going to determine the reputation of corporates going forward, whether investors stay with them or abandon them, whether they're able to be eligible for loans from banks. And I think the entire financial system is going to now gear up to see the response of companies to this whole agenda. On that last point, and I'll end with that, I think the implications in terms of financing for corporates is going to be very severe. Already today around the world, there's around $43 trillion of funds that are characterized as ESG or sustainable funds that are essentially looking to back companies that have a strong ESG agenda. More than that, there are $120 trillion of funds managed around the world that have now subscribed to what are called the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, which are really predicated on ESG investing principles. So I think going forward, it is going to be increasingly difficult for companies to raise equity or to raise debt unless they have a very strong and powerful ESG and sustainability story. And really, when money talks, corporates do tend to listen. But also increasingly, I think they're listening for all the other reasons that I outlined. So I think going forward, it's not something that is above and beyond, outside of budgets, done as and when companies feel the interest or need to do something. It is becoming very core to the sustainability of organizations and their ability to be successful in the future. And I think that's the biggest really element in what we're going to see going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Mukund Rajan, and all of this surely augurs well for our ecosystem, for our planet, for our health, and for humanity at large. So thank you so much for outlining, and especially when you ended with those humongous numbers, $43 trillion and $120 trillion. So we are talking, big bucks. These are big numbers, and as I said, clearly. It means good, and for the ecosystem to thrive in coming years, taking into cognizance the increasing challenges of sustainability and merging it with governance. So thanks for that. I'll come back to you later. I would like to now have on the virtual platform is Ms. Dhruvi Shah with us. I would like to ask my tech team, my colleagues at is Ms. Dhruvi Shah with us? She was there earlier. Till the time you get her on the panel, let me move to. I see Ms. Dhruvi Shah there. Hi, Dhruvi, are you there? Just a second. Sudhir is calling from Pradhan. Yes, Sudhir. Yeah, but she's yeah. So we have Dhruvi is there. Hi, Dhruvi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I got logged off. Don't know whether the problem was at my end or your end, but yeah, I can't start my camera. So,
Anyway, so we
yeah.
extend a warm welcome. I extend a warm welcome to you, and once again, nice to be having you on one more Pradhan Samagam. Last time we met was on Himalayan Samagam. Today we are meeting in Samagam 2022. So before I put a question to Ms. Dhruvi Shah, here is a brief background about her or information about her background. Dhruvi Shah is the executive trustee and CEO of Axis Bank Foundation. She heads the foundation's programs which aim to create sustainable livelihoods for rural communities in India by enhancing and diversifying their streams of income. Dhruvi has over 24 years of experience spanning banking, microfinance, and rural development. She has shaped the philanthropy and corporate citizen engagement for the Royal Bank of Scotland. She is also the curator and author of the Book of Aspiration, which is a collection of inspirational memoirs from social leaders. On a personal note, she spends time guiding emerging social entrepreneurs and youth who wish to make a difference. She likes to travel to the hinterlands of the country to understand rural communities and particularly their culture. As an avid reader, she focuses on understanding the interconnectedness and influences of culture on people's life and interaction with nature and things. So that's Ms. Dhruvi Shah for you. Dhruvi, I'll straight away jump into the question that we have for you. You have perhaps joined us a bit later. The way we've structured this session is, we have two questions for each of you. It is our request that you take 4 or 5 or 6 odd minutes to answer your questions. And here is your first question, which goes like this: that partnerships, as of course we know so well, partnerships are a cornerstone of Axis Bank Foundation's development programs. And how relevant do you think that it is for CSR and foundations to play a pivotal role to drive inclusive, sustainable, transformative change of scale, Dhruvi?
Right. So, thank you, Anup, and good evening to everyone here. I'll focus on why partnerships are important, not just for us, but what we can now kind of call it as the CSR grant as investments. It's differently enabled now, which means there is what CSR grants can do, and there is what CSR grants can't do in this whole space of social investments that we say, which also kind of brings more importance to how we partner, both in terms of how we partner in the approach, how we partner for the outcomes, and more importantly, I think how we partner to make the various kinds of monies that are available for the development sector to make the most of it. Sometimes I feel we give disproportionate, how should I say, expectations that are there from the CSR grant. We also have to realize that the CSR grants or philanthropic money is a very, very tiny capital compared to all the other kinds of money that is available in the sector. So by partnerships, we also mean how do we use our funding to leverage every other funding that is available for the sector or for people or for the outcomes that we are looking at. And that's where, again, partnerships become important. How agile can the funding be when you're trying to design the interventions or design the funding for it? Uh, a lot of our programs, we we aspire and desire to leverage a lot of money from the also aspire to see if credit can be made available through the local banks that are there, through all the government programs that are again designed to enable financial and economic inclusion. And to that extent, the partnership frameworks are designed, and it keeps evolving. There is no right or a wrong way. What we focus on, and we would like many more people to focus on, is how do you make this money more efficient. There is a certain flexibility that is available in the funding, which also means there needs to be a lot of flexibility in the donors. There needs to be agility in the donors, and there has to be agility in the partnerships. Also, collaborations that is now kind of the buzzword, or there are so many collaborations coming. It's also important to understand that collaborations also have to have complementarity within itself, because very large collaborations on similar lines also tilt the kind of outcomes that they desire. And the kind of problems we are trying to solve needs to have multiplicity in solutions that these funding kind of gives. So that's where the whole partnership approach needs to be applied. And we try and do this, and I hope to see that in the future we can see more partnerships happening so I'll stop at that, Anup.
All right, Dhruvi, I hope that we get your camera running in a while. So when we come back to you for the second question, I think there was some disturbance with the sound as well. What I could catch was your emphasis on agility and efficiency, and how do we make the money travel further, which is in the development space. So thank you for that. And let me go ahead and introduce our next panelist, Mr. Alex Paul Menon. Before I put the question to him, Alex is a pro people and pro development IAS officer of the batch of 2006. Alex is a service oriented individual with a passion in rural development, public health, and education. He has a thirst for e governance initiatives and a drive to excel in all domains of public administration by utilizing technology. So big focus on technology. And many of his e-governance initiatives have been recognized and upscaled also as state models like the midday meal online monitoring system and the digital land record room. Apart from that, he calls himself an NREGS man right from the launch of the scheme, and has done pioneering work in poverty alleviation through NREGS and convergence of agriculture and allied sector schemes, along with watershed works at Chhattisgarh. In fact, our question to you, Alex, is going to be on convergence. But before I come to the question, let me complete your background. And why he was posted in Balrampur, Rama Nujganj district, he successfully developed e-governance initiatives like Cosmos. And Cosmos is the acronym for Chhattisgarh Online School Monitoring System, which won the prestigious National E-Governance Award Gold category. Currently, Alex, he holds charge as the Joint Development Commissioner of MEPS in SEZ, Tamil Nadu. Alex has joined us today from Chennai. A very, very warm welcome, Alex, to Samagam 2022. And my question to you is that given your strong belief and experience in the convergence approach for more effective and inclusive development, what are the areas of challenge that you see in your experience, in your thought process of CSO, civil society organizations and corporates? What must they be conscious of when they are collaborating with government stakeholders? So as a senior government officer, as an IAS, what inputs or advice would you have for this particular question?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very old bio. I will have to update it first of all. So it's all right. So first of all, let me put it on record that I hate the word convergence.
Okay.
Because because I call it as forced marriage. I don't even call it arranged marriage. It's forced marriage of things basically. And the need for convergence arises because as public policy practitioners, we the bureaucracy actually fail to take the aspirations of people in mind, and then we in Tamil we say it as செருப்பு தச்சிட்டு காலை வெட்டுறது. That means जूते बना के फिर पैर काटना. You prepare the sandal and then you start chopping the feet as per the size of the sandal. So that's what we've been doing, and that's why this whole need of convergence itself is arising. So had we created a unified or a shared vision, the whole need of convergence, as an artificial phenomena wouldn't arise. Convergence would have become a very natural, organic, phenomena had we gone down to the community and started planning at the grassroots level, keeping their aspirations in mind, listening to them. We all know this popular story of the fly blind man and the elephant. I used to wonder and ask, the blind men could talk to each other, but they could never ask the elephant, what it was. They could have directly asked the elephant what it was. Probably it would have told them, boss, I'm an elephant, rather than all the confusion. So here, we have never asked the elephant. The elephant is basically, I'm trying to say the communities for whom we are working, for sectors which we are working as to what is actually needed. Every time we are all forced to think about innovation. So I always tell them, please ask if it is needed. Don't ask if it is novel. So there is always this thirst to do something new. Rather than first of all fulfilling basics, we are all beating around the bush, innovating, and absolutely not catering to what the basic needs of the community is. Once I put that on record, why I hate the word convergence, I would also want to say, how did we in our efforts personally had to do that workaround and use convergence as the buzzword and get things done. For example, I can, we are here to speak about, convergence between Sarkar, Samaj, and Bazaar, where most of the times, let me say, the civil society groups working in a particular sector. If I take an example of education sector, and there are multiple NGOs working with multiple agendas in the same school. There is somebody working for primary education, somebody working for enrollment of girl children. There's some NGOs working for computer education, computer literacy, and someone working on improving maths and science education. I have not even seen these 4 or 5 people sit together and talk to each other. If overall improving learning objectives is the key, what stops all of us from sitting together, pooling in all our resources, drive on a common agenda, and achieve that in the next few years? I have spoken to people who have vision for the next 100 years. I don't know if all of them will be alive to see what will happen after 100 years. But there is an agenda of 100 years to achieve computer literacy in schools. So what is happening is that we are all driven by a narrow vision, which becomes the fundamental problem, when we work in these sectors. So how do we create a shared vision which reflects the realities, the needs of the community? Is the question. Once we do that, what happens is that then there won't be creation of artificial schemes from which that I'll have to, like for example, if I say I had a scheme called Backward Region Grant Fund, and there are conditions of, and I'm always driven by magical numbers and not logical numbers as to this much percentage, 10% should go to this sector. I would ask, why not 9.9? Why not 10.102? Who decides this 10 and 12 and 11? It's all magical numbers which govern our lives, basically. So if you can leave all of it and look at logical numbers and actually get into the shared vision of let me say, improving learning outcome in mathematics and science in 25 schools in this particular district. And if there are 5 NGOs, 4 CSR partners, all come together and actually create a shared vision, probably we might have made an impact. But just because we are actually having, our siloed approach, we really fritter away our resources. I have seen 4 or 5 volunteers working in one school from different NGOs on different agendas. That could have been minimized to 2, because giving an additional 2 resources in a small primary school in a village is a big thing. But there are 5 people coming for 1 hour and then doing different things, finally adding no value to the school. And we, from the bureaucracy, also add up to a lot of confusion to this whole thing, because we ourselves don't have a vision for this. So here is where I see that. And one more thing that happens is that there's a lot of duplication that happens when we spend on things. I have seen CSR initiatives spent on, let me say, supplying good drinking water, when we have schemes with which we could have actually funded that. So, everybody has a very siloed understanding and a siloed vision of how to intervene in the sector, and they all throw in something. They all just scatter something in the fields. We are not taking them all on a platter and then putting it together and and then feeding the community, basically. And what happens is the government also has certain gaps. For example, I cannot hire let me say consultants with a lot of, let me say, industry experience, project management experience in government, because they're on highly paid resources. Rest of it, you say government does not lack funds at all. If I give more examples, I know I worked with NABARD for, Pradhan for quite a long period of time, and they were sponsored by NABARD, and NABARD had brought in Pradhan for 7 villages to dig farm ponds. So when we intervened, I said, boss, I can sanction farm ponds and NRGS. Why are you wasting your money on farm ponds? Let's put the money in human resources, which I cannot basically support, so that we can enhance, scale up, and use the money effectively. So, and there are so many, funny examples which I can keep on quoting, throughout this conversation, where our siloed approach has actually, not led to great things. The moment we decided to have a shared vision, and and government, I always say, is like a sleeping elephant. I mean, if anybody really wants to make a change, NGOs, CSR providers, corporate sector, whomsoever, the first thing they should do is actually try and wake up this sleeping elephant. Because the moment the sleeping elephant wakes up, the weight it can carry, the speed it can achieve is equivalent to nobody. None of you, the corporate sector, the NGOs, can actually make that change in the same capacity and speed with which government can achieve. So all our collective efforts should be to basically wake up the sleeping elephant and make it run. And we all need to actually fundamentally believe in a lot of bottom step. What I've also seen is that I'm sorry to be critical, but I actually wanted to just speak the truth, and I've been speaking truth. This whole corporate style governance of NGO sector is another drawback with which, because the next question after 1 year is that, oh, what is the achievement? I should be showing some ticking numbers in the portal with 200 villages touched, 5 countries reached, 5 lakh students touched, and whatnot. If I put together all of these totals together, I would be having numbers beyond the population of India. So this whole corporate style of number crunching and not looking at the qualitative change which we are making, even in 100 villages, or let me say in 100 families in a village, has to be the driving force, rather than looking at all the numbers. And that's typically a corporate style governance of the NGO sector. So we got a lot of talent from the corporate sector, but which has actually taken this style of governance of NGOs in a very different direction, and I've been very critical of that also.
Thank you so much for thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but thank you for being so straightforward and so upfront, in sharing your views on a public platform like this, and just putting it out over there, in as plain and simple words as you could, And I think so you've gone all, if I may say, all guns blazing, and I really appreciate that as the program anchor. And you said, you spoke about why we need to have a shared vision and this whole silos approach. So I'm sure that many people who are watching and listening this are listening to you very, very carefully, taking away a lot of takeaways. And let us all try, also through Pradhan and the other organizations that are behind Samagam 2022, as to what all we can do in trying to create a shared vision and not get enamored by these, numbers and this and that, So lots of examples, Alex, you have shared. Thank you so much for that. I'll come back to you later. I would now like to, in fact, ask, my colleagues in the tech team, has Miss Reshma joined us or not? Is Reshma there? Perhaps she is not there. If she is not there, then I'll go to Mr. Ravi Sridharan. So Sudhir again is calling from Pradhan. Yes, Sudhir. All right. So Mr. Ravi, I can see Mr. Ravi is here. Mr. Ravi, very, very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. So, we've had a whole day, and the way we've structured the session, I don't know what time, I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I don't know what time you joined, but in case you did not hear it earlier, then, what we're doing is, we have 5 panelists.
Arun, I heard all of it. I've been logged in, I just couldn't come in as a speaker.
Wonderful. So here is a brief background of Mr. Ravi Sridharan. He's a BTech from IIT BHU and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, and after a very successful corporate international career of 24 years, he has committed his life to social work. For the last 11 years, Ravi has been working and doing work on systemic change for social good. 6 years ago, he has founded a first of its kind institution, which is called the Indian School of Development Management, ISDM. And ISDM has been established to build and strengthen the narrative around the need for management in the social sector that can help the social purpose organization. So that's the broad mandate of ISDM that has been founded by Ravi. So this is a brief background about his work. And to come to the question, Ravi, that I have for you is uh, whether your views on this entire when we talk about government, civil society, and corporate, Sarkar Samaj Bazaar collaborations, that on this growing trend, and what could development sector stakeholders do to make them work better? So based on your experience, yeah, it's all yours, Ravi.
No, thank you so much. And apologies, I had some technical problems coming onto the speaker, but I was listening to everything. And if all I could do was to just press play back on all that Alex said, I would just do that. That would be all that I have to say. But I'll try and say it in my own words since I have some time. But Alex, thank you for setting the stage for that and giving me a segue into it. I just want to focus on just one single thing, which I think COVID has made us realize uh, to the extremes, that the government can't do anything on its own, the markets can't do anything on its own, and the civil society can't do anything on its own. And I think any one of them is fooling themselves if they think they can do anything on their own to make the world a better place, according to that shared vision that Alex talked about. So the single point I want to make to this audience is that idea of collaboration across civil society, state, and markets, collaboration within organizations in the civil society, the spirit of collaboration. The problem that has happened, and Arun, I think you also talked about it very briefly, is for some reason, and thanks to the way the corporates have dominated the narrative on society, and I'm not saying it in any bad way, it has become one of a very serious competitive mindset. We live with phrases like competition breeds excellence. I think that phrase needs to be damned somewhere, because collaboration breeds far more excellence than competition will ever breed. And thereby, this idea that we need to move from competition to collaboration. When I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad, from day one, I was competing. I was competing for market share, I was competing for eyeball, share of wallet, God knows what. And that was always a win lose mentality. I won at the expense of some other competition. And I got all my incentives and my rewards based on that. But in the social change space, it has to be about collaboration. There is nobody we are trying to defeat other than the problem that we are trying to defeat. And that mindset of collaboration is super important. Unfortunately, even in my own world of social sector organizations, everybody seems to be competing with each other. It's like Alex said, in one district, you will have 6 organizations working on the same problem but not willing to talk to each other. Now, why is that? Maybe as a culture, we become one of those, who've been bred to compete. When I came second in my class, my dad asked me who came first. So that's the mindset with which we need to somehow get over that mindset and start respecting the fact that if you collaborate, you will achieve far, far more. The volumes of money, whether it's the 280, 300,000 crores the government is spending, whether it's the 80,000 crores of private philanthropy that's is being spent, whether it's the 15,000 crores of the CSRs, and forget that, even the business, the capital markets that are spending, I don't think it's achieving its results. Today, after 75 years, and this year we'll be celebrating all that, in absolute numbers, poverty has only increased. Even if the entire nation was in poverty in 1947, today we have more people in poverty than we had, the entire nation had. So, in absolute terms, we seem to be actually going backwards. Percentage, we may have come down from 99 to 25 and 26. And you and I know how statistics can be used to sort of, present our stories the way we want. I honestly think if we can't get this act of collaboration going, we have no hope in hell of progressing as a society. And when we started ISDM, and I don't mean to plug ISDM or anything, but when we say we need a management in social sector organizations, we're saying we need a management that's very different from what it is in the states and what it is in the markets. The state, for example, can't take big risks. When Alex is making a decision that involves large sections of the population, he can't take high risk decisions. He can't do experiments that easily. Whereas me, and as a social purpose organization, I can do an experiment. But if I start trying to act like the government, I'll be foolish. So I need to figure out where our role is, where the government's role is, and where the market's role is. Markets can bring phenomenal, competencies, phenomenal capital. The state can bring, like Alex said, the wake up that big elephant and make it do things that none of the other two can do. So and when we talk about development management, which is a whole space we are trying to build in this country, actually even in the world, We're talking about a management where instead of competing, you're collaborating. So how do you create human resource practices that encourage collaboration? How do you do marketing that is collaborative? How do you do, project management that's collaborative, and so on and so forth? And similarly, other things. And I'll just touch on one or two things that I think are important for this coming together. For example, the corporate style of management is all about unique selling propositions. Whereas here, it can't be something that I only know and the world doesn't know. If you want social change, you need something that the whole world knows, the community knows, the community can carry out this work that they're doing. So we have to start defining a whole new management for the social sector, which will make it work in ways that are collaborative, inclusive, participative, with a human development approach, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, a lot of social purpose organizations seem to have willy-nilly borrowed business management practices, and that's a complete disaster. So we have to go back and figure out how do we manage social sector. Now, unfortunately, the social sector organizations are also to blame because we threw management like the baby with the water. Now, corporate management, you needed to reject. But you need management. Management is all about bringing people together, bringing money together, bringing process together to do things at scale. Today, there are more CSRs with more than 100 crore budgets, and that's 2% of their profits, than there are NGOs with 100 crore plus budgets. That's the scale you're able to build in the NGO world. You're not able to build scale. I mean, yes, there are stories of how things that have been modeled in the NGO world, whether it's Manrega, whether it is the watershed, whether it is the ambulance program. There are many things which have been scaled. But you also need to know, and those are, you can count on your hand, on your fingers. But you need to figure out, how do you create a BRAC-like organization in India? How do you create a Kaboom-like organization in India? And create that scale that is required. And in India, there is no point in doing social work if you cannot think scale. And I'm not for a moment discounting grassroots work in the village. That is important. But the mindset of scale and thinking, how do we model things? So when I work with out of school girl children, and I might only be working with 60,000 girls, my mindset is of the 6 million girls who are out of school. And I have to think of models which the government, the big elephant, the sleeping elephant, whatever it is able to then, pick and run with. So I think I might be taking too much time, but the single point I want to make is collaboration is super critical across Samaj, Sarkar, Bazaar. That requires a very different approach to leading and managing social purpose organizations. And we need to get that, and we need to get that soon.
Thank you, Ravi. Thanks a lot. Again, you have added to what Alex mentioned. So very, very thoughtful insights and inputs, Ravi, from you. I don't think Reshma has joined us in today's program, so I'll come to our fifth panelist, which is Saroj Mahapatra. And before I put the question for Saroj, here is a brief bio or brief information about Saroj. He's the current executive director of Pradhan, which is, of course, as we all know, a voluntary organization. Saroj has more than 26 years of experience of working with state government projects, networks, and several projects of WFP, IFAD, UNICEF, Manrega, and NRLM with focus on participatory planning process involving marginalized households in remotest areas of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Saroj has directly worked with poor communities of the Central India tribal pocket for a long period of time and has done extensive work, provided thematic leadership for irrigation, climate resilient infrastructure creation with integrated natural resource management approach. So that's Saroj for you. He has also been instrumental in preparing the INRM manual for Manrega implementation of Ministry of Rural Development, Government of India. He has also been part of several working groups. So that's Saroj's bio. Saroj, my first question to you is that having had considerable experience of working with communities, CSOs, corporate donors, and state and local governments, so you've seen it all for such a long period of time. What role do you feel that organizations like Pradhan should be playing to serve the needs of poor and marginalized communities? I think, especially based on what I have to go back to what Alex said. I have to go back to what Ravi said. They have really taken us, into thinking in another way. It was all going goody, but Alex and then Ravi putting Alex. I see you smiling. So they have, I think it's another. Of course, it's counter. So based on that, based on your experiences, what would you say?
Yeah, thank you. regarding Mr. Alex, we've been working with Mr. Alex for the last, I think, 5 to 6 years in Chhattisgarh. We jointly work in many districts. So I personally believe that Pradhan is one of the stakeholders in the entire ecosystem, and there are many stakeholders. So, and there are there are many stakeholders in the entire ecosystem. So Pradhan is one of the small players in the entire system. And at the same time, I think multi-stakeholder orchestration is very much important to bring about the large-scale change in the human condition. So there is government, there is donor agencies, there is community-based institutions, and there is research institutions, there are resource institutions, there are corporates. So I think if this convergence can take place at the grassroots level, keeping the community's need and the community's priorities into considerations, like Pradhan has been involved in promoting.
Saroj, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Can you please, your voice is not clear. So can you just check your?
Okay, let me be louder.
Also in the Q&A, some comments are coming that voice is not coming clearly.
Okay. Okay, just a minute. Is it not audible?
It is audible, but it is like
Okay.
on the lower side.
Okay.
So maybe
So-
speak closer to this
Yeah.
and a little louder. Maybe. Yeah, that will be better.
Thank you.
So now is it clear?
Yes, this is clearer. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think the Pradhan-like organization should be involved in mobilizing the community, building the capacities of the communities, and then interface between the government, donor, and various NGOs. And we can orchestrate various types of platforms. Like we have been talking about winning coalitions in the body. So we believe like government is one of the major stakeholders. We do work with government, and at the same time, government has many flagship programs like NRLM, DMF. In the previous session, we are talking about those. And at the same time, the donors and the corporates, they can give the development support cost of the CSOs. So how to orchestrate this multi-stakeholder partnership and multi-thematic partnership, I think this is one of the basic roles that we can definitely play in a large scale. Right now, we are partnering with more than 70 NGOs across the 7 states where we are working. And at the same time, the outreach is near about 10 million population. So I think this partnership is coming in a very big way actually. So that is the spirit, and at the same time, during the previous sessions, like one of the consensus was like it should be very much purpose driven. So if we are aligning around the purpose and if the goal is very clear, then I think the multiple stakeholders can be done in a very significant scale, and the outreach can be achieved in a very large scale, and the large scale change in the human condition can be achieved taking in an area-based approach and in vision mode. So, and at the same time, I think how to orchestrate this partnership around the big ideas like suppose NRLM or DMF or education system that Mr. Alex was mentioning. So partnership around the big ideas and to create a significant impact. So there are 4 pillars around this. Like one is to take the priorities of the communities and community institution. Second is this should be around the big ideas. And third is the multi-stakeholder orchestration around this. Suppose the entire ecosystem with several stakeholders are working, then I think this will come in a very a common platform, share the common vision, and then details the milestone and all the actors detailing can be done in a very significant manner. And in this winning coalition, how we can develop a mutual respect and then appreciation of each other, how to acknowledge each other's work, and there is no small or big NGOs. Like we have learned about the smaller NGOs are also working in a very good manner, and we need to learn from them actually, and we are learning from them actually. So I think to bring about the large scale change in the human condition, we need to bring all the stakeholders in a single platform, and government and CSOs and the CBOs, the community-based organizations and the community institutions, those I think those institutions need to play a very critical role, and we need to build their capacity so that they can negotiate with the government, they can negotiate with the donors, so that they don't dependent on us actually. So I think that is the model of that is a sustainable model actually. So I think Pradhan, like organizations, can play a very significant role in this all this bringing about the change in the human condition in a very large.
All right. Thank you, Saroj. So I think there was some issue with the voice, with the volume, but what I could gather was, of course, we all know Pradhan works with many partners, and what you said in the towards the end, that you want them to lift themselves up and be a little bit more on their own. So that is what I could gather. I could also gather some numbers, that you were sharing, and the big impact that Pradhan is creating on the ground, working with its partner organizations. So we've completed the first round. We have another 30 odd minutes before we close this session. And I would like to come to the second question, Dr. Mukund Rajan, for you. And in fact,
Anup, I have a request to you and all of the speakers. I actually have to leave for a meeting. So can I take this second round question first and then leave, if it's okay with all of you?
All right. Would that be fine, Dr. Rajan?
Yeah, Dr. Rajan. And,
absolutely. Please
all right.
go ahead.
Okay.
Please
Sure, Alex. So I'll come to you, and in brief, of course, you can be brief and share with us that what can government institutions and stakeholders. So again, this Sarkar, Samaj, Bazaar, and we've heard your views, so candid views, and so upfront when you answered the first question. But given all the constraints that we have, still, what can the triumvirate of Sarkar, Samaj, and Bazaar do better? So what facilitation can happen? How can these collaborations work better? And how can we derive maximum benefit from CSO and corporate stakeholders? So, of course, we know, as you rightly pointed out, that, not work in silos, have a shared vision. But is it anything else, Alex, that you would like to share with us to make this, do better?
Yeah, I actually wanted to thank Ravi for actually adding up more spice, on the same fashion. I would want to extend the same argument of competition and collaboration into the process of selection of civil servants itself. I think fundamentally, we as a community of civil servants, we are competing till we die. We came into the exam via a competitive process, and I don't know what are we competing for. I still don't understand. One officer throws the other officer's project. Once he steps in, and it's so much of competition. Whereas we can all survive. There are only 5,000 odd of us. Basically, we could all do good by learning to collaborate. So the process of UPSC itself should change. Forget it. Let me come back to the main question. Because I also speak from the experience of having made things work with CSOs and corporates, and from that experience, what I would present is only a few arguments. Wherever government can actually, where the officers are good, where the whole team is good, they should actually drive everyone towards sitting on a table and build it right down the common vision, and think beyond that one individual sitting on the particular chair. Rather, the whole team in the department should be taken on board, and the shared vision, the collective vision, the unified vision should be built and owned by everyone in that room. Right from the undersecretary till the special secretary to the CSOs and to the corporate sector, everybody should actually should build and own that shared vision. That has actually helped in our cases. Wherever we all sat together and actually listened to the elephant and also made that shared vision as the vision of the community. It kind of sustained itself even without the support of that single officer leaving, that single individual in the organization leaving. So where, as I've seen Pradhan's way of working, they put community at the center, community at the center whenever they have to build anything. So I would repeatedly say, listen to people, put your ears to the ground. That is the first fundamental step in actually building a shared vision. Second, what you call as a bottoms-up approach, basically, where you put the community at the center and make them do it for you. You are only facilitators, you, me, corporates, all of us are only facilitators in the whole process. And by doing this, you're making it sustainable, you're building leadership in them, you're increasing their capabilities. And after a point of time, there has to be an exit strategy for all of us, basically. You can't be there forever. The moment you think that you're going to be there forever, you actually going to ruin it actually. So you have to get in with an exit strategy. That's something very fundamental to such a collaboration. And when we actually start building this shared vision and detailing it, I have experiences from the labor department where even after I've left, where the labor organizations, as well as the whole team sitting there, is still working with the same document of shared vision which we created. Just because everybody was invested in the dream. We sold a great dream. So wherever government or the officers in the government fail to basically pull everyone towards this shared vision, I think it is a job of the corporate sector to use its funds as a stick, and the CSOs to basically use their convincing abilities to push everyone towards that shared vision.
Okay.
I think that is all I have to
No, thank you. I think if I had to, when I'm internalizing what you're saying, instead of being individual driven, it should be institutional driven. It should be an institutional driven approach, because all of us, whichever part of India we are from, we are all seeing, everyday examples of something going good in a particular department. But the moment the IAS officer is transferred, somebody else is coming, then, we all know what happens, So thank you so much for all of that. And, of course, as I said earlier, very, very strong and very, very clear words, inspired us a lot, that we have to all go back to the community, So I think for me, the big takeaway of what you have said is we have to go back to the community. We have to constantly be at the community level. So thanks, Alex, and we'll let you go. Hope to continue this association with you in the future as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks. So I go back to Mr. Mukund, Dr. Mukund Rajan. Dr. Rajan, here is a question for you. That, in fact, I'm going to club 2-3 things together, since this is the second and the last question for you. And the question is that, is it possible to do good and do well in business at the same time? So 2 things. How do we merge and marry these 2 goals? Can GDP growth targets and SDGs coexist? So again, this challenge, and the question that we've essentially been putting to all panelists about Sarkar, Samaj, and Bazaar, that what role does this triumvirate need to play in the context of this, the 1 or 2 questions that I just asked you, Dr. Mukund Rajan?
Sure. So let me start by sharing a little bit of personal experience in the group that you mentioned in my introduction that I worked for over two decades, which is the Tata Group, India's largest corporate house. The group was established in Jamsetji Tata, and in many Tata establishments you will see a quote of his. It's not clear whether he actually said it in those very words, but it's certainly something that I think over the decades people have subscribed to. And essentially it says, in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in business, but is in fact the very purpose for its existence. So in other words, he had very early on internalized a lot of what we're hearing from the other speakers, that you have to put the community at the center of what you're trying to do. And your success indeed depends on the success of the community. And it's self-evident, I think. You can't have a successful business house if you don't have successful customers, if you don't have successful investors, shareholders, and so on. So that is something that I think the Tata Group's case, I think, has got strongly internalized to the extent where really at the level of the holding company, it is now principally owned by charities whose mandate really is to give away whatever they get as dividends towards supporting good social causes. So I think the circle is in a sense complete. What comes from the people in a sense goes back to the people manifold. And that's something that has created pride in the organization. And very importantly for the Tatas, I used to be brand custodian of the Tatas. We could see through measurement that the corporate brand, which is India's most powerful corporate brand, was really enjoying stakeholder support and very importantly trust, because of the sense that the group was really committed to giving back to society. And that's reflected also in the mission statement of the group, which is to improve the quality of life of the communities it works with. So I think there is a living example of a corporate house that has now survived over 150 years. It celebrated its 150th anniversary in 2018. And in the last 100 years, every decade, it has been amongst the top 10 corporates in this country. And now, of course, is the largest. So I think there is a very good example of doing well by doing good. And I think going back to the previous question you asked me about the growing salience of ESG now and how performance is being measured and driven in the corporate sector, I think people have understood this, that you really need to demonstrate that you're paying attention to issues that matter to the community if you are to enjoy the trust of your stakeholders and have any prospects of sustainable success in the long term. I think the things that you still do need more of, and certainly in India, I think, and this is where civil society and government, Samaj and Sarkar also have a very important role to play, is in a sense making sure that corporates stay true to at least the lip service now they're starting to pay. So, for instance, on issues around disclosure, around transparency, around measurement, I think there's a lot that can be done to ensure that what corporates say and what they do are correlated, and people are able to actually test how companies, businesses, enterprises are really delivering on their commitments and promise. I think the science and technology now are improving to a point where a lot more of this can happen. So let me give you an example. So for instance, natural capital valuation. When you talk about the impact that, let's say, an industry has on forests or the natural environment, is there a way you can actually measure the adverse consequences and then build that into the way in which the enterprise is expected to cost its products and services and the recompense it has to give to the local community where this either destruction or cutting of forests or impact on the environment is taking place. So if you can internalize many of those costs, then you start getting a much truer sense of corporate performance. The same thing is true of climate change. If you could put a price to carbon and ensure that carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions by polluting industries actually result in a sense, a tax or a toll on these companies, then I think you'll see a very different set of behaviors. And this is where I think the role of science, the role of measurement, the role of technology to broadcast what companies are doing more broadly becomes very relevant and can actually shift some of the discourse that takes place otherwise.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Rajan. In fact, as I mentioned right in the beginning when we were, backstage, I live in Dehradun in Uttarakhand, and it is these issues which really dominate the discourse in our state. So we have frequent talks about green bonus. We have, of course, so many forests in Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand is a Himalayan state, and not only Uttarakhand, but all Himalayan states are confronting these similar questions of how does one balance environment, sustainability needs with development. So I could really relate to that from an Uttarakhandi context. From the context of my state. I hope that post this session we will be in touch and take this dialogue further. Moving ahead, nice to have you, Dhruvi, with your camera on.
Managed.
So we have been losing you on and off, but now you're finally here. And this is my second question for you, Dhruvi.
Sure.
In fact, the last question of the day, which is relating to the COVID pandemic. And has the pandemic forced you at the Axis Bank Foundation to re-strategize and rethink your programs and interventions? Or has it validated your approach to CSR? Apart from that, and other than that, how do you see growing your outreach and on-ground impact, going ahead? So in the shadows of COVID or whatever, now this fourth wave apparently coming, not coming, we still don't know. How do you look at this, Dhruvi?
Yeah, so couple of learnings out of COVID, and it will not be fair to say that our program was it didn't require any change, because the world has changed, the context has changed, the demands have changed, the need people felt has changed, right? So definitely what really worked for the grant is, like I said, the flexibility that we have in the grant allowed more investments to come in, and investments in coming very fast, and there was not time to give it much thought and what is the demand and all of it. So I think to that extent, grants were flexible enough. I mean, as far as we could see. What we also realized post-pandemic is, and probably this also kind of probably counters the point Ravi made of scale, is scale for NGOs have different meanings. You can't really compare it to a corporate scaling up or a government scaling up, and it's honestly it's not equal, because your monies are absolutely not equal. Your purposes are not equal. What we realized is scale is necessary, but so is spreading out. So you need many more NGOs rather than few who have really scaled up. NGOs who are scaling up need to re-strategize themselves, right? So you need all kinds. You need large organizations. You also need smaller organizations. Um, so for the community, what we felt is, while we do livelihoods, we need to add other components in the program, which we will shortly start doing. And it also told me and us is we need to also invest in different kinds of organizations, which are remotely located and who have fallen off the bandwagon, especially after CSR and even more recently. So those are the areas one needs to go and build organizations, because they are almost disappearing from those areas, right? And then there is not going to be anybody to collaborate when we start looking for partners to collaborate. And civil society plays a very definite role in that. And I'm hoping we will be able to turn that into, I don't know, program design or action from our side. Yeah, what was the other question? Sorry.
No, I think this was basically it. In the context of COVID, how are you at Axis Bank Foundation? Re-strategizing your work. So this was essentially it. And how do you, see you growing your outreach and on-ground impact? So largely, as I said, in the shadows of COVID, and I think you've answered, that part. Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, so again, the same thing what I said in the first question is to get businesses to become more responsible for the community that they are deriving their profits from. Leveraging more money from the government programs. A lot of money doesn't get utilized, simply doesn't get utilized. Let's not even talk about effectiveness, it simply doesn't get used. So, how do you get that money more to people is something I think CSR funding or any grant funding should kind of focus on.
All right. So thank you so much, Dhruvi, for that. And Ravi, I'm coming to you now. Are you there, Ravi? Yes, yeah. So, Ravi, of course, I had a question for you, but there's also one of our attendees, Anuja Rani, has asked a question. So perhaps I'll put both of them together, and in your own manner, you can answer both of them. Perhaps you would like to mix them. So my question actually to you was that also very interesting that given your background, given your own experience, how are you looking to capacitate young and mid-career professionals to work more effectively at the intersectionality of these stakeholders? So, I think this is more from an ISDM context. And the other thing also, in one way or the other, also related is, which is Anuja's question relating to innovation, that how is innovation or creating something new? So that's the way she is expressing herself, which is in a way natural, could be nurtured, promoted, or preserved. So, so two questions in one. One is ISDM, and second is, your views on innovation, on something new. Ravi, over to you. You are mute. We can't hear you. You are mute.
Sir, I request you to just unplug your earplugs.
Can't hear you. Yes. No, still not. Please try taking off your earplugs. Can't hear you. No. We can't hear you. No, we can't. Shrishti, is it something at our end or?
His end.
No, sir. It's is his hand. He has to re-log in, so will work.
All right. So I think before he re-logs in, I think yeah, he's lost his connection. Let me go to Saroj for the final question, and also I'll also request Saroj to give the vote of thanks. So how do you see Pradhan evolving over the next 5 years? Ravi, are you back? We can't hear you. Sorry.
Not
It's
audible, not audible.
no, it's our bad luck. We can't hear you. Maybe we take some other time. Today we just seem to be not able to connect with you. So I'll go to Saroj. And the question, Saroj, was that next 5 years, 2022, 2027, how do you see Pradhan evolving over the next 5 years to considerably increase its outreach and influence in the development sector? And how relevant will it be intra-sector and multi-sector stakeholder partnership in that journey? So over to you, Saroj. And as I said, we also look forward to having the vote of thanks आपके end से आज के इस सफल कार्यक्रम के लिए.
Sure. I think I'm audible. I'm better
Yes,
now.
this is much better.
Yeah. I have changed the system in between.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
there was some problem in the earlier system. So thanks, Anup. I think this is a very good question to me. In the next 5 years, what Pradhan is aspiring is like we would like to reach a large section of rural poor to improve the lives and livelihood of near about 50 million people. We are thinking, and I have already said we are one of the stakeholders, and there are many stakeholders. So we would love to partner with many like-minded NGOs, government, donors, corporates, and research institutions, resource institutions, because evidence building is also very much required nowadays. And research and advocacy would be one of the research, advocacy, dissemination would be one of the major components of that. So, if I say the broad contours of the engagement would be around large-scale partnership. So, partnership would be one of the major contours of our interventions. Large-scale collaborations with government and creating winning coalitions. Like we have been talking about winning coalitions since morning. So, winning coalitions, keeping the system change perspective into mind. I think that would be one of the key shift in our approach that we've been doing for the last 35 years. And the geography would be very specific. Like we'll be focusing more around the tribal areas, central, eastern India, and tribal belt. And at the same time, there would be we are expecting large investment in creation of irrigation assets, land and water interventions, NRM-based interventions, and so that there will be area-based interventions. At the same time, there will be, the quality of lives of the rural poor will be enhanced. So there will be a holistic development around health, education, nutrition, and livelihoods, income, prosperity, inclusive women in the Gram Sabha and governance. So in those areas, obviously, we would be definitely put our best efforts in bringing about the large-scale change. And in the partnership approach, we'll be collaborating with we are collaborating with the grassroots partners to bring about the large-scale change in this people, resource, and institutions, because people is the community. The resources are starting from land resource to forest resource, human resource also. And the institutions like Gram Sabha, the panchayats, the Janpat Panchayat, the district panchayat, and the state government, and at the national level also. So I think that coalitions would be one of the major driver of change. And then for doing this system change approach, I think this coalition would be the key triggering factors. So the local and micro level solutions generally we used to do. These are very important. But at the same time, that looking at the scale and the complexities of the problem in India, so I think we need to look into the bigger frame actually. So that's why this scale matters a lot. And at the same time, we'll be proactively looking for support from corporates and donors to give the development support first, and then leveraging the government flagship program, and then to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of government flagship program in a large scale, so that the quality of lives of the poor people would be changed. So this is the overall. I'm very conscious of the time, so in short I have shared.
Very nice.
And at the same time, let me thank to Niti Aayog.
Sorry, Anup, are you able to hear me now?
Let Saroj finish. I'll come back to you, Ravi.
Yeah, I think Anup, you can ask Ravi. Then after
Maybe
that,
we
I'll
ask
give the
Ravi.
vote of thanks. Yeah.
But before I go to Ravi and before you give the formal vote of thanks, Saroj, here is wishing you, on behalf of everyone who's here, let me take the liberty of wishing you and all your, wonderful colleagues at Pradhan all the very best for the next 5 years. So, as you said, 5 years, you hope to touch 5 crore lives, 50 million lives, which is 5 crore people in our country, building bridges between donors and between governments. So my very, very best wishes. But before I come back to you, let me go back to Ravi. And so nice and happy, Ravi, to see those green ticks next to your name, which means you are on and we can listen to you.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Anup, and I'll keep this really quick. The first thing is on the question of what are we doing at the intersection of these three. So the main thing is we are trying to develop the domain of management for the social sector. So far, going back to the days of Harvard and Wharton, there is an MBA program which is for the business. Going back to 1880, Woodrow Wilson, there is public administration that is managing the state. There's not been any serious work done on building management for the social sector. And almost always it's been trying to apply business management principles to the social sector, which we all know now is failing miserably. So the work that we are really doing is in the space of trying to build the domain and theory and practice of management for the social sector, which we are calling development management. So that involves building knowledge, building talent, building institutions. And so that's the answer to the first question. And I'm keeping it really short. But the answer to the second question on how does one work come with innovations? And I think the answer lies in what Alex said, and I think Ruby also mentioned, which is let's go listen to the communities. Unfortunately, you and I try to decide how do we innovate for the community. I think we are far better off working with the community and using processes like systems thinking, design thinking, which we can translate into fairly widely practiced area called participative processes on how do we use all those tools and help communities come up with the ideas and innovations that are required. And if you see the work of Professor Anil Gupta, whoever, there are so many innovations that you can come up with the community to solve pretty much all their problems. I think sometimes there's an arrogance in all of us that we will come up with an innovation to solve the community's problem. I think we need to figure out how do we use our expertise, like I said, design thinking, systems thinking, and so many other things. I'll give you a simple example. There's a center of excellence we are working on at ISDM is how do you use data sciences, artificial intelligence, and machine learning for social good? How do we use it for improving public education? How do we improve it to deliver better public goods and services? How do we use it to improve public health? So we need, and those are expertises a lot of us have coming from the corporate, coming from the government. So how do we bring our expertises, but have the humility to listen to the community and through them get? So it's a collaborative process. So it's the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar really working together to come up with innovations. So that's my answer to that question from the audience. And I'll stop there because I know I've taken a lot of time.
Wonderful, short, simple, and crisp, and to the point, Ravi. Thank you. Just simply what you said in 4 or 5 words. Go back to the basics. Go back to the people, and you get your answers. Yeah. So we are at the last leg of what a wonderful day it has been. We've had close to 25 odd speakers today, and many listeners, patient listeners. Once again, back to you, Saroj, for the formal vote of thanks. Please carry on.
Yeah, I think it was a great day actually. I've been here since morning and listening to various speakers and then various sessions, and it was a great learning experience for me personally. And special thanks to Niti Aayog, FICCI, Aditya Birla Center of Excellence, BAMI for this logo support, and special thanks to Priya and CYST for co-convening this Samagam event. India attitude for managing the event, and at the same time, Crescent's Media for audiovisual clip. So special thanks to them, and special thanks to my Pradhan team members for organizing this event, and then they were very much there in the background as a design team. And I must thanks Ram and Sarmishta of Mission Samriddhi, Sasank and Pratham, Education Society and Neeraj and the Brisbane group. So they moderated the sessions very well. And also all the panelists, I must thank all of them. And special thanks to Anup for patiently organizing and then इतना अच्छा से आप किए हैं. I must appreciate that. I think thanks बहुत कम होगा उसके लिए. So special thanks to Anup for moderating the entire day very patiently and then very beautifully you have summarized all the points. And many thanks for this.
I have only one thing, मैं I want to share आप सबके साथ करना चाहता हूँ. देखिए प्रधान की कितनी बड़ी खूबी है. If I may use, I'm an outsider. I'm not a Pradhan person, but yet, so I am also one like you. But they trust, So this I think is really something amazing that Pradhan is trusting. In italics, I'm saying outsiders. कि ठीक है यार आप program moderate कर लो. It could have been a Pradhan person also. So really, hats off to Saroj and Naren and Sudhir and Soparno and Nivedita and Shrishti and Amit, from the tech team, and maybe of course I don't know all the names. I'm also, from coming in from the outside. But this is another great example of collaboration. So yeah, thanks everybody. We have overshot by 3 minutes. But Ravi and Dr. Saab, 3 minutes over the whole day, I don't think is a big sin. Yeah. So can we say namaskar to each other? Bye, Dhruvi. And I think just one request. Can we please clap for all the listeners? We have been talking also, but all these guys who have been listening, I think they deserve a big round of applause. So, आप सबको हमारी तरफ से बहुत-बहुत thank you so much. तो बंद करें? Shall we close now? Can we close? Can we leave?
Yes.
So we'll be in touch. Ravi will be in touch. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot. Thanks.
All the best. Bye. Thank you. चलिए सरोज, thank you.